Hello and welcome to SAE Tomorrow Today. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Jeffrey Chou, founder and CEO of Sonatus. On today's episode, we'll discuss how Sonatus grew to support 8 million vehicles for software-defined, and most importantly, what does SDV mean? We hope you enjoy this episode. Jeffrey, welcome to SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. SDV, or commonly known, or to some folks, as software-defined vehicles, or you can add on any other acronyms you want to define the software in the vehicles. To me, it's a base layer. And what your company's doing is you're taking that base layer and you're enhancing it. How do you enhance SDV?
I think it depends on what you mean by SDV, because as I've said, you ask 10 people what SDV means, you get 15 different answers or more. And I don't necessarily think that the industry has settled on a one-size-fits-all definition. I think I've heard it being defined as a car that's updatable, is one. I've heard it being defined as middleware. I've heard it defined as the layer that abstracts software from hardware. Lots of different ideas around SDV. I think it's coming down to where everything is part of that SDV camp. But if you talk about a base layer, there's definitely a lot that can go into a base layer. Maybe what we ought to do, and I love to geek out about this stuff, don't get me wrong. We could probably start at the base layer and build up from there. To me, base layer means that layer of software that is right above the hardware. So it's almost like an operating system, which some people call it an operating system, but it's slightly different than a component operating system. It's more of an operating system across the vehicle, across components. I guess that's part of what you could consider an SDV stack. And then upon that, as you call it, building enhancements, there's definitely what I like to call infrastructure services that you build on top of that stack. So, a lot of my background came from the IT world, where when we built a software-defined data center, the stuff that we added on top of that base layer was infrastructure services, like your print server. Right? It's an infrastructure service where an application shouldn't have to worry about it, but that resource is offered as a service to all the applications that's sitting on the network. Your storage is a service. It's an infrastructure service. Your security is an infrastructure service, right? All of these things are services that the base layer should provide to upper layers of software, like applications. And to me, that's the build out of SDV from the base layer and offering more and more infrastructure services on top of that. So eventually you get to a point where the platform offers all of these different services so that the application developers can focus on just their app and don't have to worry about all the stuff that the base layer and the infrastructure needs to provide, right? Whether that's sharing of hardware resources, whether that's provisioning of hardware resources, whether that's security, whether that's access to data, whether that's managing data, whether that's, compressing, encrypting, all of that stuff. Let's try to decouple that from not just the hardware, but all the stuff that you're building at the application layer. All of that should go into this quote unquote middle layer, SDV layer, whatever you want to call it. That's how I view it. That's how we have built our software stacks, is offering more and more capability to that middleware so that we enable what we call a platform for innovation.
I like that. The platform for innovation, you have the infrastructure services. We threw out more names there, so I have to go back and ask you, when do we get a common denominator where everybody says, okay, this means this means this means this, go? When do we get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was at a panel in Munich last year, and that question came up. And, my answer was that we'll never get there because the term SDV will continuously evolve. And as more and more ideas, um, spring up and become viable and even become accepted by the industry, you'll eventually throw them into this bucket called SDV. So I think it's forever evolving and forever expanding. And if you don't have the latest and greatest feature or capability in your quote unquote SDV, you might still call it an SDV, but over time, um, if you don't keep up with the new innovations and the new capabilities, eventually you may not be considered an SDV anymore. Back then, SDVs were only about OTA. If you're an OTA, you're an SDV. But now there's so much more that goes into, people's ideas about what an SDV can do, that I think we're getting the point now is of, if you can do OTA but nothing else, you're not necessarily an SDV.
A valid point. To me, in my humble opinion, OTA was the great unlock. It enabled the SDV layer to be created. And I'm going to ask you this. So we have SDV. Is SDR next? Software defined robots. Is SD going to go in front of everything? I think about it from a storage perspective, but is that what's coming next?
I think it's, we had a saying back in the tech sector, because we started off with SDN, software defined network. Then it went to software defined storage. Then it went to software defined security. And then it went to many other software defined things. And now it's at software defined data center. So back then, back in the early 2000s, we were saying software defined everything. That was kind of the joke that everybody has. And now it's here in vehicles, and yes, in robots. It'll be software defined everything. It'll be SDE, eventually. But I like to think that you have robots that have been around for a very long time that are going through the same transformation that auto and other transportation verticals are going through. But then you have all these new robots around humanoid, and I would like to think that they were designed from the ground up with this technology already in place. So let's see where the world ends up, but it's going to be an interesting evolution.
It is, and you have software-defined turbines, software-defined natural gas. I mean, it's the term's going to continue, no matter which way you look at it. And you're 100% right. I don't think at some point we're going to have an SDV for a vehicle standardized. But Sonatus, you've been in this for a long time, developing really great software. And you go back to the Hyundai Genesis program. What did you learn over that time? Or you want to say the evolution of, sorry to say it, software over that time? What did you learn?
We learned, I mean, there's how many hours do we have? I, I would say the most comforting lessons that we have learned revolved around what our original thesis was when we started the company, and that was the vehicle is becoming a data center on wheels. And I think over the last several years, all of our hypotheses that we came up with have had some measure of validation. So the industry technology evolving, the software technology evolving, as it has unfolded over the last several years, has unfolded pretty much in the same manner that it did in the data center in the tech world. So that was a comforting feeling, but it also gives us a little more momentum and resolve in what we want to do going forward as well, because we kind of, based on history, we kind of see what's happening going further. I would say probably one of the biggest things we learned was from our customers. At the time when we started the company, a lot of us came from the tech world, and there was a lot of underappreciation for how rich the knowledge and the talent and the ecosystem was in transportation, right? So just because we're quote unquote a tech background company bringing innovation to the automotive and commercial space doesn't mean there isn't any innovation in those industries. There has been for a long time. And it wasn't until we got involved with our customers and partners, we're going, you know what, there are amazing engineers, amazing ideas in this industry too. And it's less about introducing new innovations to an industry that hasn't innovated. It's more about how do you marry the two cultures together. I think that's probably the biggest learning that I have had. It's not necessarily on the technical side as much as it is on the culture side.
That's a very valid point about the culture. But before we get to culture, I want to emphasize something that you brought up and get your opinion. Data center on wheels. You're correct. These vehicles have a lot of compute in them. And you look at the average statistic, the car's sitting 75% of the time idle, potentially either in a work lot or in a home garage. Do you ever envision in the future a point where you plug the vehicle in, and then that owner or lessee of that vehicle is then selling compute power back to the grid?
Yeah, I totally think that is going to be the case because the car to me is another vessel for resources, whether it's hardware resources, energy resources, or even software resources. So, once you get universal connectivity, which we're there now, and the connectivity infrastructure continues to evolve and get better and faster and cheaper, then yeah, any resource that you have plugged into the network should be a resource that can be, shared and utilized. This is the whole point of infrastructure services, right? Once you plug some resource into the network, it should be shareable by everybody that's on their network. The car is no different. Your printer is there, right? Your NAS, network attached storage thing is there. Your TV is there. Your home automation system is there, right? Your Alexa is there. Your IoT devices are there. Why not your car? So, I see a car not just as a transportation device, but it is the most complicated IoT device we have, and it has a whole bunch of resources in there. Imagine this. Your car has a ton of cameras. Why aren't the cameras shared with your home security system? Right? Why not? Why can't, when somebody breaks into my house, why can't I look at my car's cameras through my automation home security system? Those cameras should be made as an infrastructure service to any application, right? And the horn. Why does my security system at home have to have its own audio horn when I could use the cars?
Mm-hmm.
And heck, if I had multiple cars at home, they should all be tied together. So yeah, I totally see the car and whatever else that's sitting on the network as a resource that should be used. So that's my view. From as a network geek, that's my view.
You're right. And the common denominator, not to go back to point one here, is software. Software is going to enable all that, and there's no reason why. So you have the alarm system there, but then if you're going somewhere, and let's say you're going into work for 6 hours, you should have a button that pops up in your powered by your SDV and says, okay, would you like to sell X amount of compute? We'll pay you X amount of dollars. You should be able to have that option.
Absolutely. I think, and the thing about it is that more and more compute resources are going in the car. Soon your car could be more powerful than your laptop. In fact, it is, and it will be even more and more so. So why not, right? I mean, didn't Bitcoin is doing this, right? You can sell your compute resources to generate Bitcoin nowadays, right? It's been there for a long time. So, and BitTorrent has been there, right, for the longest time. You had your storage resources at the edge in your computer available to BitTorrent and stream to anyone. So your car should be no different. In fact, it's just, it's not just the compute, it's the storage that's in your car too. So absolutely, I totally see that in the future, and that's got to happen. It will happen.
One of the greatest things that Bram Cohen, if the audience doesn't know, the founder and creator of BitTorrent, invented was the more people that get on that node or that torrent, the faster it goes. And it was the complete opposite. Remember, in those days, everybody's bandwidth constraint, and then Bram comes out and says, okay, well, the more people we add, and you put this little packet here and this little packet here, the faster it goes. It completely revolutionizes distribution. Sorry, movie industry of movies and music. It completely revolutionized it.
That's right. That's right. By the way, one of the other things that's happening from crowdsourcing is this whole, potholes in the road or speed traps. where everybody is contributing, well, cars are going to contribute, automatically in the future. So that's a resource as well, that knowledge resource that's distributed. So you're absolutely right. I think the car is going to be yet another source, resource, knowledge source, hardware resource, software resource, security resource that will go into the general trend of democratizing technology and resources has been there in every industry, and it's going to be here in transportation as well.
It's coming in transportation is changing dramatically, and from the SDV perspective, a lot of the global OEMs, and you put out a really great report on this, they said, okay, at first, we're going to monetize all this data and we're going to sell it. Oh, you want your seats heated? Oh, you got to pay for that. You want them cooled? You're going to pay for that. Now all of a sudden it's like, whoa. We're moving away. What did you learn and uncover in that report that you posted on the Sonatus site?
Well, it's a report as well as many other things in our dealings with OEMs. And again, this was another talk that I had, early last year at Versailles. What was interesting was the industry was going through a period of disillusionment when it comes to SDV. And that was a big topic back then, a year ago, and I think it's still there, because one of the things that OEMs do when they see a new, let's say, technology, in this case it was SDV, is how do you monetize it? How do you monetize data? How do you monetize SDV? How do you monetize new feature? And my position is that monetization comes much later. Much later. And I think the wrong order is trying to figure out how do you monetize infrastructure like SDV. To me, SDV is an infrastructure play, and it's more of an enabler than a monetization pathway. So, I mean, in the tech world, when we invented SDNs and SDSs and SD data centers, it was not about monetization. It was about enabling more innovation, right? This platform for innovation that we're talking about. The monetization came later. The software-defined stack was an enabler to doing more things. And we were solving infrastructure problems first, and the monetization, the applications came later. By the way, from a different audience, from a different generation, right? Software-defined data centers enabled social media. Well, I'm not bright enough to have invented social media when I was working on the software-defined networks back then. It was the next generation that figured it out. And my contention is that the next generation will figure out whether the digital services and applications that will be monetized on top of SDVs. So to me, that was kind of a repeat of history, but it was definitely enlightening to go through that again. Is monetization may not be the first thing, the first value proposition of an SDV.
No, if you look back there, after that, a guy named Tom came and he wanted to be friends with everybody and come and hang out at his space. I mean, I mean, we're going way back there. He figured it out, and then you have to give credit early on before it imploded. Don't forget, News Corp was one of the first institutional investors there. Murdoch actually personally led it. You're right about monetization, and then if you have to look at it also for what value can it add, what can we learn. At CES you unveiled a new AI partnership with Michelin where you're monitoring tire wear. That's really smart, because I go around a parking lot, I'm like, oh, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good. A lot of individuals don't see it, but if you take that data, you put it into the system, it says, okay, you need to get your tire replaced. Think about the amount of lives and the positive good that can do in society. It's pretty immense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where AI naturally fits into SDV. It is the next layer that's built on top of SDV. I consider it part of SDV. Some people call it AIDV. It's going to be interesting how many people will define AIDV as different as the next person, right? How many definitions of AIDV are we going to get? I'm just waiting for that one, but I think it's going to happen, obviously. But Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the value proposition of SDV has been unclear at best. It was definitely a foundation for enabling data, but the real value proposition is what do you do with the data? And you need AI for that, right? You need AI for that. It's key to deriving value and insight from data, and it's key to deriving value from an SDV. So that's why we're really excited about the direction that we're headed and the new products that we've introduced around building AI and their solutions and services on top of an SDV so that you can derive value from all of this technology that you put in the vehicles over the last several years.
And I'm going to take a contrarian approach, which you'll probably agree with. Well, I hope you'll agree with, is that AI is making us smarter. You read these doom and gloom papers or news articles. AI is making us smarter. I think it's making us smarter. There's things in history that pop into my head, and I could go down a deep dive. I went down a deep dive the other day about the butter wars, which was just this fascinating thing. And I learned all this technology, but without AI, we weren't able to do that. But it's so you're doing good with the tires, and you also have testing because the company recently entered into a development partnership with the Nissan Technical Center Europe to deploy AI tools for testing. That's good. What are you looking for with these AI tools for testing? Could you break that down for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of our products is what we call AI Technician. And it's exactly a tool for diagnosing and testing and debugging. And in the R&D phase is actually for development too. But when you're talking about accelerating testing, you're talking about very tangible value proposition to the OEM. It's about improving quality, right, of the end product. It's about accelerating the time to value, whether that's accelerating time from in the R&D cycle, so accelerating time to production. It's also about accelerating time to finding a root cause. For example, when your customer drives into the dealer to get something fixed, instead of waiting a week to get something fixed, maybe it's an hour to get something fixed, right? So it's accelerating time to fix and root cause, root cause determination, right? And the third one is it saves money. So it saves money because it saves time, and maybe you need fewer test vehicles when you're diagnosing and testing cars, and maybe you save you increase the productivity of dealerships so they can process more cars through, and you're saving potentially warranty and repair costs. So there's a saving cost component, there's a saving time component. I mean, and there's a quality component. It's just it lifts all boats to be able to use AI for testing and validation. And it finally gives a purpose to all of the data that all the OEMs have been collecting and generating and analyzing over the last 10 years.
The data is helpful, but here's the other side of the equation. Are the technicians buying in and being willing to use the data and not saying, wait, I'm a technician. I know this. I don't need that contraption. Take my job one day. Are they buying in to use this technology?
I think the thing about technology is that you're always going to have people for it and then people against it. I mean, that's always going to happen, right? And it's just human nature. But what I have found is in every one of these productivity gains because of a new technology, um, ultimately it results in more work available to people, right? Because it unlocks more things that people can do with it. So there will undoubtedly be people who are looking at diagnosing a vehicle and going, you know what? This thing is doing my job not as good as me, or equal to me, or slower than me, or whatever. But I think over time, people will recognize, it can help you do your job. That's number one. You can fix a lot more cars. That's number two. So instead of doing a car an hour, maybe you can do two or more. And maybe you could work on, a wider range of vehicles then, and unlock other things that you can do. So, to me, AI is definitely a productivity tool, but it's not necessarily a replacement for good old fashioned human problem solving and creativity. That general purpose AGI is a long ways away, I think. So we're excited about rolling this out to technicians, dealers, anybody who's looking at debugging a problem. And yeah, we'll be able to help some, and in others we won't be able to. But that's the nature of technology, of new solutions, and I think both sides will learn from that.
Do you feel that the consumer will push this forward? It says, well, I used to have to wait 2 days. Now I can wait an hour. I want this technology. Do they push it and the OEM has to listen because the consumer could say, listen, I'm not going to buy your vehicle anymore if you don't implement this? Do they become the deciding factor?
Yeah, I think the market and the buyer always is the determining factor. And frankly, if it's better, cheaper, faster, it's going to win.
Hmm.
And AI is going to make things better, cheaper, faster. So it's the same economic and human nature and competitive forces. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it. And then you'll be at a competitive disadvantage, right? So if one service shop takes a week to fix something and the other one does it in, less than a week, then that dealer or in that service technician is going to be at a disadvantage. So I think, and it's still, of course, it remains to be seen how good a solution is, right? It has to prove themselves. But yeah, I think all of these forces are going to come together and eventually the right solution will win.
And then you're right, because if you go to, say, dealer A and they don't have it, and you go to dealer B, the consumer's going to move over there and the market's going to change. The fascinating thing about Sonatus is that your software is running in over 7 million vehicles, 7 million, a lot of vehicles. What was it like going from vehicle 1 to vehicle 7 million and counting?
Whoa, people say having the first baby is the toughest. I don't know. People should look at having the 7 millionth baby and see, how they feel about that first baby. Scale breaks everything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we've learned so much in this journey, going through, over 30 new models worldwide, millions of vehicles. The amount you learn, and the operations, logistics, safety, reliability, follow throughs, support, SLAs, testing, the different permutations, the challenges with OTA. My God, I mean, it's just scale breaks everything. And this is interesting because a lot of people ask me, well, what all these upstart EV companies, are they going to win? And I always say, you know what? It's the incumbent OEM's game to lose because they have the scale, they have the distribution, they have the brand, they have everything figured out. It's really all on them. And if they wanted to win, they would win. Because scale breaks everything. And a lot of these smaller OEMs that are coming out with all these new vehicles, they got a long ways to go too. It's just that, will the OEMs that have been here for decades, will they turn it around, and put themselves in a position where they can win? It's really up to them. They should win. So we've learned a lot scaling. One vehicle is one thing, one model is one thing. 1,000 was a big milestone. 100,000 was a big milestone. 1 million was a big milestone, and we have more to learn yet. So the first vehicle is not the easiest.
No, you're right. You have lots to learn, but then as you go from 1 to 7 million, you and I both know this. The amount of data, wow, Sirland starts going up. How do you manage and handle that extremely large amount of data?
Well, first option is you don't manage it. You just let it go. I mean, it's interesting. What we see, this is kind of like the early days in other industries where the natural inclination is let's collect everything we can until everything breaks, and then we figure out what to do with it later. And ultimately what happens is you can't collect everything. And a lot of what you collect, you can't use because you're not collecting the right thing at the right time. So this whole data management, a lot of it what has been challenging is the amount of pre-thought that has to go into it before you really start doing something or collecting the data. And so the data management really needs to start with the thinking before it starts with the actual infrastructure. So I think, but OEMs are beginning to catch on, and they're getting more and more sophisticated in determining what is important for them to collect, what is important for them to not collect. Data privacy is a big one too, that's ever evolving. So how do you manage and collect data with all of the new rules and regulations that are coming out? That's a big one because it's different region by region, right? It's not just
Mhm.
data management and data collection worldwide homogeneously, it's heterogeneous. It's who, where is the customer, which geography, what are the local laws, right? And regulations, what are the local sentiments, which generation are you selling to? My kids who are Gen Z don't care about where their data goes, and I scratch my head and I'm going, what? Um, right? They don't care where it goes or who has it, which is a different generation, right? And it depends on, what kind of fleet you're talking about. So it's all very, very different. It's complex. So data management, there's definitely not a one size fit all. And I think anybody who's in data management and data collection and data processing in this industry, it's definitely a complex problem. But a lot of bright people are on it. A lot of good solutions are being developed, and it's kind of it's the tail and the dog wagging each other here.
Yeah, and then you forgot GDPR and all the complications that evolve around that because you have a customer Nissan in Europe and you have a customer in America. Boy, oh boy, that gets very complicated from a regulatory perspective. So that's the car side, and Sonatus also works on the Class 8, the trucking side.
Yes.
How is it different from a software perspective for building SDV for passenger vehicles and building SDV for Class 8 trucks?
Well, I think to the first order, the technology is very similar.
Mhm.
But the adoption of the technology and the mindset and the resource and the use cases are slightly different. Definitely when it comes to commercial vehicles, the design cycles are longer. And I think that affects, adoption rate. It also affects where each commercial OEM is in their journey on adopting SDV technology, right? The dynamics in that industry is different. You don't necessarily have the OEM driver relationship as much. Now there's, fleet operator and fleet management companies along with the OEMs and the suppliers in that mix too. So there's a influence and a need for the fleet operators and the fleet management companies that are different than us normal buyers who go out to our local car dealer and buy a car. So that changes, the value proposition of an SDV and what is prioritized or not, and especially how data is used. So all of those are complicated nuances in that market that definitely affect anybody who's in the commercial space.
I would say that there's similarities and there's nuances. As you grow the company, how do you avoid becoming the everything company for everybody and stay completely disciplined on really what you're good at?
It's very tempting, and I think a lot of smaller companies or any company, that's probably pitfall number one. They say, the old saying is that you die from indigestion before you die from starvation. So focus is something that I think every company has difficulty doing. And certainly we're one of them too, right? We don't want to die from indigestion and take on everything. And I think this becomes a big part of our partnership strategy. The beauty about this industry is there's so many players in the ecosystem, right? Tier one suppliers, tier two suppliers. We don't have to do everything, and we don't do everything, and we have a robust partnership program where we work with our partners. We go, you know what? We don't ever want to do that, but we need that. Can we partner and do something together? And so the good news for us is that we have a lot of friends out there, and we, define our roles and responsibilities very clearly. There are many ways to slice the cheese, and we try not to step on anybody's toes, but this market is so big that there's enough there for many winners. And that's our attitude here. So we know our swim lane and we stay in it. We're infrastructure, we're AI, and we're only software. And we partner with, other infrastructure players, hardware companies, model builders, all that stuff, right? We're focused on transportation. We're not going outside of that. And every day we look at the bullseye on our whiteboards and we go, this is our core and this is out of our core and that's way far, rose-colored glasses, and we try to stay in our swim lane.
Because when you stay there, one, the business stays disciplined, but it also is a healthy ecosystem where you can partner with individuals in the ecosystem, not necessarily trying to put them out of business. And then when everybody wins, really great technology is built and deployed, and at the end of the day, the consumer wins. Jeffrey, as we look to wrap up this awesomely insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them today?
I think what we led off with, and that is, what's the state of SDV? And in my view, SDV and AI are coming together. And I think you will see us talk more and more about it, that AI is going to be the baseline. It's table stakes now. And SDV was just, the enabler. And SDV is going to fade into the background, and AI is going to be how you realize the value of SDV and your data and everything that's going forward. It is going to be what drives this industry forward in this next phase. And that's where we're focused. And I think that's where our customers and our partners need to focus as well. So I'm very excited. This might sound like a close the chapter on SDV. In some ways, maybe. But I'll never close the book on anything infrastructure because I'm an infrastructure guy. But AI is where it's headed and where it's at today.
AI is building the future. Today is tomorrow, tomorrow's today, the future is Sonatus. Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you for having me.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.